Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Stesha Brandon, the Literature and Humanities Program Manager here at the Seattle Public Library. Welcome to today's event with the Jack Straw Writing Fellows people. As we begin today, I want to take a minute to acknowledge that we are on Indigenous land. Here in Seattle, these are the traditional unceded territories of the Coast Salish people, specifically the Duwamish people. We honor their elders, past and present, and we thank them for their stewardship of this land. Welcome to today's program with the Jack Straw Writers, presented in partnership with Jack Straw Cultural Center. We'd like to thank the author series sponsor, Gary Kunis, and the Seattle Times for the generous support of library programs. We're also grateful to the Seattle Public Library Foundation. Private gifts to the foundation from thousands of donors help the library provide free programs and services that touch the lives of everyone in our community. I just want to give a big hello and welcome to all of our attendees here at Central Library and also watching the live stream. I have got just a couple announcements before we get started. If you're here in person, you can pick up copies of this year's Jack Straw's Writer Anthology at the table to your right. And Levi is modeling that for us, so that's exciting. And as I mentioned, if folks in person need to exit the auditorium during the event, there's a door directly to your right. I also, wanted to let you know that we are doing a little survey. So those of you that are here in person, we gave you a paper survey as you came in. And for folks watching online, I'll drop a link in the chat at the end of the event for the survey. It's really helpful. I read all the surveys. It's really helpful for us to shape the programming for the coming year. So tell us what you're interested in seeing and that kind of stuff. And it's really helpful. Thanks. Now I am delighted to introduce Michael Schmelzer. The 2022 Writers Program Curator, Michael Schmelzer, is a biracial author originally from Japan. He currently lives here in Seattle, where he serves as editor-in-chief of Floating Bridge Press. His poetry book, Empire of Surrender, is the winner of the 2021 Wandering Angus Book Award. Along with Megan McClure, he is the co-author of the nonfiction book, A Single Throat Opens, a lyric exploration of addiction and family. His debut full-length Blood Song was a finalist for the Washington State Book Award in Poetry, the Julie Suk Award, and the Coyle Book Award. His honors include a 2019 Jack Straw Fellowship, the Gulfstream Award for Poetry, and Blue Earth Review's Flash Fiction Prize. He's been a finalist for the 4-Way Books Intro and Levis Prizes, the Zone 3 Press First Book Prize, the John Ciardi Prize for Poetry from BKMK Press, the OSU Press, the Journal Award in Poetry, and most recently, the Jake Adam York Prize. Please help me welcome Michael Schmelzer.
Thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you for everyone catching this on live stream. Once again, my name is Michael Schmelzer, and I am here to host and represent the Jack Straw Writers for the 2022 year. A little bit about the Jack Straw Writers Program. It is a writers program where a guest curator annually would choose 12 writers to come and basically work on their writing project, build a community amongst themselves, and present at various reading opportunities. One of the great parts about the program is to be introduced to writers that you may not have heard of before, as well as to just really experience what they're doing, the diversity that our state has to offer. And I'm basically so honored and so humbled that I get to host and introduce everyone here, so I'm going to get right to it. I don't want to waste any time. Representing a mix of genres and experiences, the 2022 Jack Straw Writers may differ in profession and education, but the one thing they have in common is that rare talent all great writers possess: the ability to search and find deep within themselves their own unique voice, and from that voice pull forth poems, stories, and essays that connect stranger to stranger. During my time as curator for the Jack Straw Writing Program, I was asked to read through many applications and to choose 12 writers to join for the year. It was a difficult task, with many combinations of writers, as you can imagine, but not for 1 second have I doubted these decisions I've made. These writers have shown a dedication to their craft, to each other, and a shared passion for the literary world. They have each, by the strength of their words and the graciousness of their personalities, have taken a group of 12 strangers and turned it into a community which I have seen collaborate, build, and encourage. It is my honor to present these 2022 Jack Straw writers today. First up is Ruth Schemmel. There's a pointedness to Ruth Schemmel's writing that is absolutely delightful to me. So I'd like to keep my introduction equally pointed. Ruth is hilarious and smart. And one gets the impression if Ruth is on your side, you can't lose. A writer who explores gender, sexuality, and social class with insight and a knowing smirk. Ruth writes characters who are flawed but trying, funny but exhausted. They are people you may never notice in your everyday life, but believe me, if you did, you would be rooting for them. Please welcome Ruth Schemmel.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you to Jack Straw. Thank you to the library. And thank you everyone who made it out here to see us and who is watching online. Really appreciate you. This is from a short story, Crawl. When I got back in touch with Alex the last time, he had just driven his dad 3,000 miles across the country and back to bail his sister MK out of the LA County Jail. MK got herself arrested stalking the lead singer of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. She had been camped out on Quietus's lawn for days when they caught her. She bathed in his swimming pool, fed on flowers and lawn cabbage, slept in the raw on his deck, and peered longingly into windows, a frightened, naked, sick 24-year-old fan. Let's call her a super fan. Surely she's earned that. She loved Quietus, she claimed in official reports. She thought if he just saw how much she loved him, he would see the beautiful, goopy something inside her, that courage, that capacity for love and extreme measures, that kinky, devil-may-care, I'll just take a dump in the rosemary, it's probably excellent fertilizer mentality, and write her a song or something. Or something. That was the thing. She couldn't really have imagined any positive outcome from her actions, except perhaps relief from whatever passion, whatever urgency or compulsion had brought her to the point. But maybe she didn't think her way through it. Maybe in her heart, she believed. Or maybe self-immolation was the goal all along. MK never encountered Quietus, who was away on tour throughout her visit, but she did encounter his groundskeeper and eventually his legal representation. But you don't want to hear about my crazy sister, Alex said finally, with his deep, sexy voice, his great voice for radio voice, the same voice that had sent an erotic thrill through me since I first heard him read in a fiction seminar 10 years earlier, before he gave up fiction, before we had a thing, firsts all around, and before we drove that thing off a cliff, and I dragged myself back to the living on the stumps of my severed arms, so to speak. All the while he had stayed sexy and cool and whole and ironic and untouched, unbreakable, except from within. I told him, if you have to stalk a rock star, Quietus of the Red Hots was at least a pretty good choice. A lot of things were wrong with that, but no one could fault her musical taste. I told him, hey, at least she went for it. Now she knew. I asked if he knew the first thing that happens when you go on antidepressants is you get constipated, because everything slows down, not just pain, healing, the leap between impulse and action, but also basic functions, digestion, respiration, hair growth, but especially digestion. I'd read that, I told him. I didn't know it from any kind of firsthand knowledge of antidepressants. Everything's fine in the digestive department too, thanks. I told him I actually did want to hear about his crazy sister, or anything else he wanted to tell me. How was he enjoying New York City now that he'd moved here from Stamford, Connecticut, for example? So, how did you get this number, Eugenia? He finally asked. This was the moment I always failed to foresee. Each time I made the decision to call Alex, the moment he reminded me I was a superfan. No less pathetic, no better able to manage my bewildering passions than an MK. Before I could answer, he filled the dead space on the line with a laugh that made me hate him, made me wonder how I had let this character, this kind of smart, kind of good-looking guy with the toe-curling tenor and the crackpot family and, okay, an excellent laugh and a propensity for self-mockery that almost made up for the way he mocked me, inhabit the one hidden room of my heart and squat there for years with no rent. Alex. I closed my eyes, twirled my nose ring, rubbed my hand through my short, bristly blue hair. Too short, even for the edgy mid to late 20-something riot girl I aspired in my coiffure and certain lipstick choices to be. Though too shy, too stunted to do anything particularly riotous or girlish in actual life. Until now. Until now, motherfucker. I kept my voice calm, the way I'd rehearsed. I have some pictures you'll want to see. I'd been studying Paradise Lost for my Milton class when I met Alex. Satan, I well understood, newly cast out of heaven and basically out of options, sought to find the point at which not being with God was being with God, where heaven and where hell was heaven. The mind its own place and so on. This is more than making the best of a bad situation, more than delusion. Satan wanted to stretch reality along a line until infinity ended and swung around. To be so far wrong, he came out on the other side. That's all I wanted. To exist at the point at which not having Alex was having Alex. To want nothingness into something, to want it so very much that it became something again. I did not simply want him back. I wanted to go back to the first breach, the first moment where it started to go wrong. I wanted to do it over and have it come out differently. I wanted to come out of this hole. I'll stop there. The story is in fiction. Thank you.
Our next reader is poet Carrie Beyer. There is a power and a surprising danger to Carrie Beyer's poetry, a beauty and sharpness that can move us as much as it can mutilate. Luckily, in Carrie's expert hands, we are left with lyricism and lore and liberation, even if it comes with a few cuts. Carrie's poetry isn't akin to the immediate flash of trends or culture, but something deeper, invisible. It is something timeless that once experienced, we will carry with us. Please welcome Carrie Beyer.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you for everyone who is here and those listening online. I have two poems to read. One is from the Jack Straw anthology, where I was working on a project elevating the voices of women within the context of a church culture, an Anabaptist German American church culture in rural Kansas. And then the other is from my manuscript. When we could not speak, we sang. I didn't love the melodies or the words. I loved the fabric of voices around me as our flesh yearned toward an understanding of the way to Zion. It was like our mothers spooned the pews, baptistry, lunch trays, close snap carpeting, every skirt and dress and covering into our mouths, till the tears ran from our eyes. She said nothing because her throat, so clogged with hymnals, could not articulate. I opened up. I think she nodded, good girl. And from our crammed mouths, we sang together. I never will forget this crying. In faith I'll trust it all my days. I loved the words. I did. They swung like a broken door, more hinge than door. My freedom is gone, our anthem of accomplishment. Death against glass. To Oma. The opulence of agony drowns out the hard, dry smack of death against the glass. Liesl Mueller and the power of music to disturb. And here it is, encased, stiff among folds of satin. She looks so good, they say of your lips, not stretched too far by the embalmer. Your pink, marbled face, your hair naturally white, your arms taut like sausages. I look as if peering germless through a deli case, interested in the spot under the nail of your ring finger, blackened as if a mallet smashed it while you sickened in your bed. The violence of your daughters crowded around, snatching the scraps of love out of your last days. My mother, her sisters, all but one of them, now here, now smiling. Except I hear no music. This church smells only of casseroles and stale perfume. This isn't how it's supposed to be, this stopping and gawking at the leftovers. Your funeral choir grinds out, sometime we'll understand, as if someone like me could just write down the meanings assigned to your body, the body that could have folded me into your voluminous lap and sang. Thank you.
Reading next, we have Erin Langner. Erin Langner, author of the recently released Souvenirs from Paradise, is technically an essayist, but what she does with words feels more like photography. Erin captures literary time capsules, and with every word, every detail uncovered, she manages to transport a reader to whatever time and location of her choosing. It should be no surprise that Erin's work as an art critic, her experience with museums, creates within her work an exceptional and striking ability to catalog moments in a beautiful, thoughtful, and thought-provoking way. Please welcome Erin Langner.
Thank you so much, Michael. Pardon my voice. This does not reflect on the Jack Straw program, the cold. Thank you all so much for being here and everyone online. Thank you to Jack Straw for this incredible opportunity, especially Levi for all of your work with us this year. And thank you to my cohort for all your support and inspiration. I'm so grateful to have been with you all. I'm going to read a piece from the anthology. As Michael mentioned, I also have a book that just launched this week. That's over there. Thank you. So this piece is part of a series I've been working on called Museum Labels for Lost Objects. I work at the Frye Art Museum just up the hill, and I write a lot of the texts you see in various places, including sometimes the labels that you see next to an object. So this is a label for some of my own things. This one's called Wilson Youth Tennis Racket, 1989. My mother bought me the racket before my lessons began, even though she wasn't supposed to. Don't tell your father, she said, but I was 7 and not paying close attention, and entranced by the shining web of nylon strings. The way they bled from red to yellow to green to blue to white. The way they were stretched so tight that when I ran my fingers over their crosshatches, they released a gentle ring. Are you listening, Aaron? My father had said to use a loaner until I was sure I loved the game. My mom was the one who signed me up, the one who played tennis herself. She was the one who led me right to the Wilson rackets, Kmart, with their long, lithe handles, their flesh-like grips, their narrow throats, just like Billie Jean's, all too elegant for a 7-year-old girl. But I was old enough to know that my mother liked to break the rules. Following that trip to Kmart, my mom hid the racket in its plastic bag on the top shelf of a closet. I would like to believe I kept the secret, but I hadn't caused all of the shouts about lying that flew through the living room following the racket's sudden excavation. None were directed at me. I watched from the sky blue couch, running my palms along its velour arms over and over. My father later took me aside to relay the outcome. If your mother ever asks you to lie, you tell me. The Wilson youth racket was never seen again. Several weeks later, my father took me to the sports authority. We came out of the store with a Prince racket, strings taut inside the brilliant yellow and fuchsia frame, branded across their center with a P. Short and stout, its head was round and open wide, just like your teacher said it should, my father said. He would know what you need. The lessons didn't last past that single summer. I was constantly confused about how to keep score, particularly counting in love. I could never grasp that love meant 0. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, the use of love this way may have come from playing for love without stakes being wagered. But tennis never felt like that. My biggest accomplishment happened by myself. I slammed the ball against a brick wall over and over again until I found the sweet spot, the place on the tennis racket where you can hit the ball with maximum force and feel no tension at all. How many times in a row did you hit it? My teacher asked. 40, love, I said. 40 times? Incredible, he said. I let the lie stand. I didn't know how to explain. I hadn't kept count. The racket kept my secret. I learned that objects could be trusted to hold on to the truth. I wasn't as sure about humans. Thank you.
Up next is poet Vincent Rendoni. Listening to Vincent Rendoni read his poems is like being invited to a friend's family reunion. And every piece of verse walks up to you, little gleam in its eyes, and has at least one fantastical story to tell. Although these poems may find the truth a bit flexible, they come to you nonetheless in all sincerity, tears in their eyes, and you're not sure if they had been crying or laughing just minutes before. All you know is that Vincent will take you by the hand, share every joy and sorrow that is found within the pages of his work. Please welcome the author of the recently released book, A Greedo Contest in the Afterlife, Vincent Rendoni.
Thank you, Michael. Man, I know you're saying nice words, but I always want to cringe when somebody says something nice about me. I want to thank, just like everyone else here, for Jack Straw. You know, I can't believe it's already November, but I remember when I first came in and was so nervous to read in front of Carrie and Katie and just these poems. And it's just like a lot's changed since then in a really positive way. Finished a book, made some friends. And I don't know if you, I know it's too late this year, right, Levi? Yeah, it's far too late. You're done. But next year, you should apply if you have a project. It will really help fuel it and get it done. That's how I felt about it. So I figure it's almost lunchtime, so I'm going to kill all your appetites right now. This piece is called Songbird with Plums, and they can all be found in the Jack Straw Writers Anthology, which is over there for sale. Abuela is craving quail with plums. Neither can be found in the fall, so she sends me to the freezer in the garage. Under the masa and offals, a sheet pan of 6 songbirds, mouths braced, eyes closed. I ask Abuela how she caught them. She cuts a cube of lard over a cast iron pan. Their music betrays them. Out with the pits, off with their heads. What about the bones? I ask. What about the bones? I crush cinnamon and cloves. She flicks salt and rosewater, humming something upbeat with a pop. Then we let the heat and pressure do its work. Time for a little break. Time for basketball. Tall men, short shorts. Sean Kemp, Rain Man, she says, licking her lips with her thick accent. One day, too many insights into her appetites. The smell of meat and fruit fills the room. Steam and juices hiss. I crack open a dark beer for her and ask if she wants to say grace. She shakes her head. When we're finished, we're going to have to ask for forgiveness. I'm left to imagine how she caught them. Nets and traps, the spray of birdshot into a flock, raiding the nest, stripping one tree, then on to the next. It will be none of these things. Years later, when I bring up the meal of stone fruit and little birds, its textures and sweetness, she will tell me when they sang, she listened. Being present was the trick. Remembering an hour for you is a day for them. This is how you lure them in. This is how you feed the hunger. This next poem, I want to just kind of give a shout out to my asshole of a grandfather, rest in peace. He really fancied himself a curandero, which is a healer in Mexican culture. And, you know, he was really full of shit, and I think he knew it, but I think he believed in it so much that he really kind of started believing in himself, even though he shouldn't have. And I actually just got back from Mexico myself and had a real experience, so this feels really relevant to share. This is called Advice for Finding a Curandero and Enhancing Your Overall Wellness. Choose wisely. I speak from experience. Some deal in herbs, some deal in birds, some deal in sin. Choose wisely. Payments vary. Sorry, offerings. Cash primero, always. Eagle feathers and seashells in a pinch. The best ones are partial to cashews. And old penthouses and playboys too. But say no to them favors to be named later. Change your luck. Smoke what they got. Sip on their tinctures. Consent to an egg on the skin. Let it sop up the sin and the rot, of which you have plenty, of which you have so much. Trust. Ask yourself if there's trust. They might be predators preying, retelling without understanding, high on their own supply. Judge their works, though, not them. Fuck-ups make the best healers. I know from experience. It was the family business. Broken knows broken. That's the right hand to wash the other. And lastly, since we're on the topic of flexible truths, this one's about a funeral that occurred. Now, about half of this is true, but actually true, but 100% of it is spiritually true. So you can decide what you want to believe. I don't care. Okay, this is called The Good, the Bad, and the Real Bad. When Abuelo finally kicked the bucket for real, Abuela said, let's hope it sticks this time. I'll believe it when he's in the ground, pushing up the mushrooms you probably can't eat. I wouldn't call what he was doing living. Diabetes took his feet, red meat, a pound of his colon, cataracts, his eyes, marzipan, the teeth. What do you expect? He claimed to be over 200 at the time of his death. To think we had an open casket. We lit firecrackers and M80s in the street, broke the sidewalks into craters and chunks. The priest, at least we think he was a priest, gave a rousing eulogy and sang from his throat. Mourners brought candles, Hot Wheels, and tamale. Mistresses wept, children spat. The oldest Tia he touched as a girl brought kerosene in an ivory-plated Zippo. Up to the casket, but my father said, there's plenty of fire where he's going. Plus, he was so full of shit, there's risk for explosion. And we all laughed, and I laughed, until it was clear the man who wrestled Chupacabra, charmed snakes and underage women, and split the Rio Grande with his bare hands really was down for the 10 count. Later at the house, when we aired out the good, the bad, and the real bad, and sang those sad bastard rancheros over a half-tuned piano and guitar, Abuela ran to the toilet and threw up the Safeway platter bologna and white bread, sheet cake and fondant, bits and pieces of the unborn daughter, and the dentures. Oh, fuck, not the dentures. They fucked up the plumbing. Mom hated her but forgave her because everyone forgives little brown ladies who lose everything. The next morning, she woke up half covered in cold compress, stirred an egg into a Modelo, dashed it with some Tapatio, asking herself, what's next? I watched her slam that tonic and stare down the clouds and laugh at herself for thinking there was any answer. Thank you.
Next, we have Emily Parzybach. Emily Parzybach's personal essays sit between introspection and exploration. She's able to examine herself closely with a clarity and precision that only comes with a deep self-awareness. Simultaneously, Emily can place her story in context, in society, in history, in mythology, with the same intelligent, curious, and thoughtful gaze. Her compelling voice and honest writing contains a type of literary depth perception that maintains vulnerability and intimacy without the soft focus of sentimentality or filter of self-aggrandizement. Please welcome the truth herself, Emily Parzybach.
I like the truth herself edition. Take it. Hi, y'all. I'm glad to be here with you. Thank you to those online and in person, and to all of my fellow writers, and to Michael. I'm reading you an essay today, and I'm going to read you the end of it, actually, but you have to know a few things. In this essay, I'm writing about a relationship that ended, and I start off talking about kind of a memory of that. There's a lot of memory and language in it, but the things that you need to know are that I talk a lot about persimmons in this essay. That's part of the memory, and I look at like the etymology of the word and all of these things. And at one point, I learned that in Korea, persimmons were supposed to scare away tigers. So that comes up, you have to know that. And the other pieces that I reference, a Joan Didion bit where she talks about wondering if her husband who died had still died on Pacific time when she's in New York. And she wonders if she could maybe go to a different place and have a different ending. So those are both referenced just so that you're not lost when we get there. So I'm starting you off on part 5, resurrection. Carmen Maria Machado writes, the memoir is, at its core, an act of resurrection. According to her, memoirists recreate the past, reconstruct dialogue. They summon meaning from events that have long been dormant. They braid the clays of memory and essay and fact and perception together, smash them into a ball, roll them flat. They manipulate time, resuscitate the dead. They put themselves and others into necessary context. I continue to live in the same room after Elliot moves to Texas, and it takes me 2 full years to empty it of his presence. In the end, I keep his gifts to me and part with the possessions he left behind. I stop trying to resurrect him through talismans he forgot. Things I get rid of after Elliot leaves. A mattress that we saved from a dumpster in Boulder, Colorado, that sags on his side, that we slept hundreds of nights on, that carries the imprint of our bodies making love, that has a stain from the time I bled through the sheets, that I place outside in the rain before requesting a pickup to the dump. A cardboard bison head that Elliot hung in our bathroom around the time he started using a children's desk as his bedside table when he brought home from a thrift store a print of a woman's black silhouette on a red backdrop. At the time, and even now, I hate all of these things and their strange lingering in my carefully crafted rooms. I cry taking down the bison from the bathroom wall. A guitar that belonged to me, that he played when we sang Emmylou Harris songs together in bed, that he left behind with all the photos of me in a box on the floor of our empty room. The medals from his triathlons and the run he did on his birthday to the top of Mount Evans, while I faithfully drove the winding road in my Jetta up to 14,000 feet. I placed these medals in a box without a card and address it to him. Pain is a kind of emotion, writes Alyssa Gabbert. Number 6, lost. Here, at the turning of a new year, I'm far less haunted. At night, I note my dreams down carefully in a journal by my bed, and Elliot is not in them. Instead, I dream maps and codes, ciphers to discern, and solutions to arrive at. In one of my dreams, circles and squares of varying sizes on parchment mark the trail to a bomb in a rotunda. I arrive to find an older woman grimly holding the detonator. I'm surprised, and maybe a little proud, to encounter this disheveled and unlikely villain in my psyche. She pushes the button. In my waking life, the places where Elliot enters my daily experience are fewer. I walk through the world we inhabited, live in the house we shared, shop at our grocery store, and rarely see flashes of him anymore. It used to be that every place rang with his absence. I would walk up to my bedroom assailed by grief, magically placing him at the top of the stairs. I would weed the beds in my backyard with tears running down my face. I felt like a shell holding the space where he used to be. Didion writes that we cannot know ahead of time the fact, and here lies the heart of the difference between grief as we know it and grief as it is, the unending absence that follows, the void, the very opposite of meaning, the relentless succession of moments during which we will confront the experience of meaningless itself. Next to this line in Didion's book, I wrote at some point, yes, tomato plants, etc. I started to garden maybe as a way to hint from thousands of miles away to Elliot, who was not watching, at a shared camaraderie, an alignment that couldn't be ignored. And still, in those moments, my mind quiet, my hands finding weeds of their own accord, I would think to myself, this gardening is his, like he first dreamed the act of hands in soil. I'm borrowing it somehow. Sometimes in the midst of showing my plants to a visitor, I would have the urge to tell them I'm not the real gardener. He is. I wondered if he's had the same sense when he settles into bed at night with a book open, skimming pages that I've charted before. Does he think the stories are really mine? Does he feel the narratives are borrowed? As the years wear on, the garden does become my own. Nowadays, I don't think at him when I gaze across the beds. The tomatoes smell like tomatoes. Time passes without him. For years, Didion saw herself through her husband's eyes, a gaze in which she did not age, but stayed forever the woman he first fell in love with. Without Elliot's gaze, I've confronted aging in a new way. I resented every shift in myself initially, marking it as a further departure from him. I would compare the present to the blueprint of memory and note, with no small amount of despair, the variances. The woman Elliot loved was thinner. The woman Elliot loved had a different job. The woman Elliot loved was a runner. It occurs to me less and less to measure my present against the past as time goes by. The memories have faded, and with them, my inclination to reach toward and imagine before. Perhaps I've now forgotten even the clues and shimmers that once alluded to things lost. They're at a distance I can't reach anymore. invisible to me. In Korean folklore, the dried persimmon supposedly scares away tigers. I learned of this superstition during my foray into the etymology of persimmon. I didn't even know tigers once roamed Korea. It's been decades since they stepped foot on that land, and now it's hard for me to remember that they were even there. Thank you.
Next up, we have the writer Helen Anderson. Helen Anderson is a fiction writer with an uncanny ability to observe people from a nearly anthropological way. Helen writes stories of human intimacy in all its messy glory, often mediated by technology and the added layers and complications that it offers. The characters that inhabit her stories are strange, poignant, funny, and surprising. There are small tragedies amid absurd events and vice versa. Helen reminds each of us of the bizarre ways in which we cope and survive our sometimes surreal existence. Please welcome Helen Anderson.
Thank you, Michael. I feel, just so fortunate to get to read alongside all of you all and to have met you this year and learned about your work. I'm really lucky. It's great to be here. Okay, this is an excerpt from a story called Career Opportunities. They bring me on board to teach the CEO to throw pots. That's how his admin says it. Bring you on board. She thinks he needs something to do with his hands. The admin says she has never interviewed anyone before. She looks at me like she is a teenager and I am her new car, like we are already inseparable. Her first question is, what's the worst kind of pottery to make? Her second question is, you're cleaner than I thought you'd be. Her third question is, come with me to get a septum piercing, please? The piercing is for me, she just wants to come along. No cost to you, obviously, she says when I hesitate. It'll come out of my budget for the CEO's mental health. On my first day, the admin sets up an introductory meeting with the CEO, who sits in a concrete and glass office containing no visible paper. He takes the last swallow of coffee from a small bowl and tips it forward to show me the inside. Gets me every time, he says. The universe, you see it? The bowl is glazed oil slick black and blue. I do see a galaxy there in the pattern of milk froth that clings to the bottom. Is that what he means? I feel myself nodding. I reach for the bowl, wanting a closer look, but he draws it back. The bowl was a gift from his niece. It was made by this guy who hosts a reality show where potters compete to make the biggest ceramic objects. The CEO doesn't have time to watch TV, but his niece told him that one person made a bathtub with a faucet that looked like a mermaid throwing up. There are things in the physical world we haven't learned to replicate, says the CEO, looking reverently at the bowl. He cups it with his hand and bobs it slowly up and down as if contemplating its mass. Haven't yet learned to replicate, the CEO corrects himself. There's a lot of work to be done. I can teach you to replicate that, I say, even though I only learned wheel throwing a few months ago as a camp counselor, when the real pottery teacher was dismissed due to inappropriate conduct with a camper and I was forced to take over. The CEO looks at me like he isn't sure what I mean, as if he often has meetings with young women in which they listen to him expound upon the bowl and the universe. Because I'm teaching you pottery, I say. I thought you were the monthly winner, he says. Monthly winner of what? He stiffens. I don't have time for this, he says. He picks up the bowl and drops it on the floor. Like it's nothing, like he just decided to stop holding it. It shatters into 3 big pieces and a billion small ones. Then he leaves the room. I look at the shards of precious bowl. The milk foam has reliquefied and is pooling on the floor. I know he means for me to clean it up, and I do. You shouldn't have done that, says the ghostwriter of the CEO's memoir. You need to show him who's boss. We are all contractors, the ghostwriter, the admin, me. But the ghostwriter carries himself like he's more than that. Maybe it's that he spends all day writing in first person as the CEO. Maybe part of you starts to believe it. I'm not kidding, he says. Power here, it condenses out of the air. The ghostwriter takes me to the cafeteria to show me what he means. He points at the chefs behind the sneeze guard and tells me which ones are famous. You can't tell just by looking because they all wear the same hairnets, the same demure expressions. I take a famous frittata and, at the ghostwriter's urging, another one. They are free. Oh, I thought he'd like you, says the admin, powdered sugar from her lemon bar showering onto her polyester blouse. He's been talking about that bowl for weeks. I just wanted to get him something he'd like. The ghostwriter rolls his eyes. No, you didn't, he says. Let's just tell her. The ghostwriter claims that hiring a pottery teacher was his idea. We emailed, what, half a dozen potters before putting up the listing you found, famous ones, and all of them said they'd never debased themselves to the point of working for him. Well, joke's on them, isn't it? The admin nods along solemnly. I don't understand, I say. The CEO's reputation has started tanking the company, says the ghostwriter, and obviously there's only so much I can do with a memoir. He glances around the cafeteria. The truth is, he makes bad, unpopular decisions. We, he gestures between himself and the admin, would make better CEOs. I had that thought, and I couldn't get it out of my head. We just need a chance to prove it. That's where the pottery comes in. I'm going to stop there. Thank you so much.
Reading next is poet Julie Fang. If history is, in fact, written by the victors, then poet Julie Fang understands remembrance as its own form of liberation. With each poem, Julie engages in an act of historical, social, and familial resistance, remembering and retelling stories passed down, parceling them into poetry, and serving them with imagination, empathy, and hope. In her artist statement, Julie wrote, I write towards possibility. What is possible in the hands of this poet, the sharp mind and tender heart, is nothing short of world building, myth making, and a better future. Please welcome Julie Fang.
Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the library for hosting us here, and of course, always shout out to my amazing Jack Straw cohort. It has been a year, y'all. So I'm reading today from my project that I've been working on this year in the Jack Straw Fellowship. It is a collection of poems based on Hakka Hill songs, which are an oral storytelling tradition that have a history as labor songs and also as protest songs. So these are poems that are about lineage and inheritance, and the borders and boundaries of race and nation and story and movement and distance and everydayness. And I am excited to be towards the part of my project where I'm going to be puzzling together the manuscript really soon. So I'm almost there. Yeah. All right. So I'm going to start with Haka Hillsong number 2. They say she came from a place where the cassid trees grow gilt and the brisk riverbeds rise steady towards the graining roads. Her whole life, she was immured by the arms of crumbling men. And so for every song she sang, there was a verse unsung. They say capsaicin stains her fingertips when she pours hot oil over peppers and dreams of a far-found world ablaze. We've never seen how the heat sears her eyes like they say, only her closed lids fuming, sealing shut the brimming steam. We've never heard her say how she went where she went, why she left when she left, or who was still there when she winged away. She says she's from a valley at the muggy foothills of a sea-worn place. Someday, she says, she'll bring us there to see. And so we start to hear the unsung tune, what savoring sounds like, the voice that calls you home as dusk descends the brisking air. Right. This one is called Cyclogenesis, or the birth of a storm. Every year since the year we left, the storms stir faster there. The waters wheel, and upon the sea, every island waits again for rain. The difference between a hurricane and a typhoon is sociogeography. The storm begins the same: warming of the sea surface, instability of the air, high humidity in the lower to middle levels of the troposphere, an inertial force, a pre-existing disturbance, and low vertical wind shear. The difference between this day and that day is a line that cuts through the sea. The sea holds the storm the same way my mother holds the phone. Every year, another cyclone grows. The difference between a grandmother calling and a grandmother not calling is what the typhoon leaves behind. All right, this one is one of my favorites. It's called Wolf Peach. And so for a little context I always share about this poem is that wolf peach is a term for tomato from a 1767 taxonomy book that was super, super racist. All right. Wolf peach. My father grows tomatoes in a glow of dark soil next to the warehouse where for many hours of a sour day, he carries boxes and bitter. They swell fat with sharp water, their navels plumping towards palms, their petioles tender where the stalk joins the leaf to the sturdy stem. Vegetable, like race, is a social construct. Fruit, like body, is an act of flowering. My father's hands touch each rough meristem, reach against the globes of smooth acidity. He bends to lift everyone, thumbs patting green stars. Name, like flower, is a category of soul. Hand, like vine, is a way to classify. My father's pinnate ribs arc over the climbing vines. He plucks orbs at first bloom of blood. He waits to pull and break at brush of dusk. Someone once said, "This flower is the same as this other flower. Can it be unsaid?" Someone once named you a name too watery to taste. How do you begin to be renamed? All right, final one. This is called Carapace. My grandmother was the first to tell me my first word. She was there, And though I was too, it's not something I can hold. She said to me, "You were a child of tongue and temper. And like me, you were meant to leave and always be leaving. You were meant to carry your home on your back, and like the women of our line, cross waters bearing the weight of our own marrow." My grandmother tells me that to know the true name of a thing is to have power over it. All my life, I protect the spine, only to forget the softness of my belly and throat. My belly believed itself a host. My throat has been without homeland for 1,000 years. What words became bone, only time will tell. What words became shell, only home can hold. And so we hold, and we hold, and we hold. Thank you, everyone.
Next up is Danielle Hayden. By examining the various identities she holds, or ones that have defined her in the past, Danielle Hayden creates work that manages to break barriers in ways that shock me out of my own mind as a reader and as a writer. When I first read her work, I felt the threshold had been crossed, but where there could be consequence, there was empowerment, something electric and dynamic and stark, but never empty. Danielle's writing is confessional, intense, and self-interrogating. It is pared down with no emotional elaborations because what is there, the details, the observations in bold honesty, is emotional and powerful enough. Please welcome Danielle Hayden.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Michael, for seeing something in me last year when you were making your selections. Thank you, Levi and Jack Straw, for this amazing program. Thank you to the other writers in my cohort for being a source of inspiration as well as imposter syndrome for me. And thank you to Seattle Public Library, not just for today, but for everything you do in the community. This is a very recent piece, so as of now it remains untitled, but I believe I will expand on it. I have confronted an uncomfortable truth that there exists a part of me that fears feeling normal. It is not that I do not wish to get better. It is that I think, what happens to the work? I recognize the dangers in romanticizing the depressed writer, the glorified trope of the talented but tortured artist, especially post-mortem. There is a comfort in cliche, even as I recognize it for what it is. But I fear what will occur when I return to days where joy is no longer jarring. What happens to the work? As difficult as it is to create art in this emotional state, let alone complete the most basic of functions, the work of which I am most proud was often sourced from the deepest shadows within me. The strong current in the rivers of regret, bleeding from the deepest hurt of heartbreak, still smarting from the sting of self-loathing. Lifting the pen and putting it to paper could feel like trying to extract Excalibur from stone. But there were days when I finally did, there in the doldrums, after hiding under the covers, there, while the pile of dishes grew higher, my hair became a matted bramble, my clothing hung so loosely on my body that people were concerned that I had an eating disorder. Pain was both antagonist and muse. It stopped me from writing, but man, when I did manage it, I conjured something beautiful from that obsidian cauldron of steaming muck. I tell myself I am in good company as I feel a kinship to the Sylvia Plaths of the world. I ponder if living out the bell jar gets me higher on the bell curve, my best writing mined from my worst experiences. Will I be good enough without the darkness? Maybe. Perhaps the dread of narrative flatline was unreasonable, but could I be as good as before? I do not enjoy depression, this companion of mine that has traveled alongside me for over 2 decades. But sometimes, as I lay awake in the stillness, in that most quiet of offerings of night, when it feels like the world is holding its breath, when each second passing carries the weight of an hour, and I look back on my life in those intervals, sometimes weeping and marveling at how quietly I can cry now. Sometimes in the throes of that, I am inspired. What happens to the work? Will it suffer once I cease to suffer? I have written before of exuberance and of triumph, but those pieces never felt as strong, as bold, as true. Am I actually weaker when I am at peace? Or is my disappointment a self-fulfilling prophecy? Perhaps if I wrote more often when happy, I will cultivate the practice. Once I exercise my demons, it means I have to exercise the writing muscles that perhaps rely too much on my troubled mind. That scares me a little. But holding on to it means that I suffer even more in profoundly greater ways. Holding on to it means I continue to do things like today, where it is now 10:52 a.m. the day of this reading, and I'm finishing this essay because I sank into a deep depression again this summer and have found it difficult to produce. It means I find it difficult to be here today, even though Jack Straw is a wish fulfillment, because I am crumbling is not an acceptable excuse to not go on stage. It means neglecting myself, neglecting my email inbox, neglecting my dreams. Holding on to it means not being the fun mother every day that my daughter wants me to be. But for her, at least, I always push through to give her everything she needs, even if mommy is too weak to play in the dollhouse right now. So which is it? May I have it both ways? Can I be the person I want to be and the writer I want to be? Healed and whole, and still adept at the arrangement of words? I do not know. But what I do know is that the DSM is not a writing guide. I fear what I will lose if I get better. But what, dear one, will I gain? Perhaps the latter is the superior question, the healthier one at least. The messaging I am trying to adopt for the future is that happiness is just as interesting as sadness. But I have danced with despondency for so long. I just wonder what will become of my projects once the music stops. Thank you.
Let me just say for the record that each of you reading tonight can have it all. You absolutely have the talent and the drive to never, ever feel like an imposter. And you have a bunch of people behind you cheering you on. Next up, Jory Mickelson. What can I say? F. Scott Fitzgerald wrote, "The test of a first-rate intelligence is the ability to hold two opposing ideas in the mind at the same time and still retain the ability to function." It's no surprise to me then that Jory Mickelson's project and his writing now is ekphrastic in nature, carrying visual as well as written arts in the mind all at once, and it thrives. These poems are sensual, in service to the arts, inspired by them, but in no way beholden to them. These poems are lush, rich in artistic literary history, and like a great painting, will leave you in wonder. Please welcome the very talented Jory Mickelson.
Thanks to the Jack Straw Writers Program, Levi and Michael. Thank you to Seattle Public Library for hosting the reading, and hello to everyone in the audience who's here, and hello to everyone online as well. This first poem is called Wonderful Life, after the film, which is my mother's favorite, which I've seen too many times to actually watch anymore. but reinterpreted by one of my favorite films, more like a Hitchcock Vertigo dream sequence instead. Wonderful Life. Late season snow in Bedford falls just like everywhere. In a shabby little office, you can still look out the window and see the flakes come down. Not even Buffalo gals will venture out tonight. No dancing then, but a bath. The stillborn calf with 2 heads was taken to the museum. Snow covering the site of its birth, just like everywhere. From the door of the cafe, what's a girl like you doing marrying a 2-headed brother of mine? Always a spray of white flowers at a wedding, on the shoulder of her dress, the fence's gate. Snow hangs heavy on the rail. I wish I'd never been born. If your name was Bert, you could keep quiet, the peace, drive your polished car late into this white. Maybe you would talk to strangers, take them to and from all night. Take the road to Pottersville. During the fire, survivors convened along the riverbank. After I die, do you think I'll be nicer? What we love, how we peril, remains invisible within that love, wiped away as easily as March's green by snow. Chicago. This is based on a Paul Cadmus painting, which is based on the Heron Massacre, which involves a conflict between Union miners and Union breakers in Illinois. Chicago. It's June. I lay on my stomach amid the graves. The early rain has washed the sky to a clarity of blue we rarely see. I am remembering how we used to race when we were young, yelling, "Let's see how fast you can run between here and Chicago." A word we used to mean almost anything we didn't know the meaning of. Like when we'd pretend we were miners falling beneath the earth, flat on our stomachs with the weight of mountains suspended above our backs, our headlamps dimming, giving the last of our strength to escape the mine's collapse. We're almost there, you'd say. Keep crawling, we're almost to Chicago. But in 1922, there was no safety when the strikebreakers were taken into the woods outside Heron by Union miners. We are always looking for the hero in our stories, a way to make beautiful all our violence. Now I turn over in the grass to read the names carved into the granite marker above my head. Sometimes I wonder if they can hear me as I lay parallel on the earth, we thinking our thoughts and unthoughts together in the early light. Some days I hope they never hear me. When in shame I wonder, how did my life become my life? How little resistance was in me when I gave myself over to brutality. What is the difference between me and the crowd of spectators gathered, cheering in the Heron Cemetery, who watched the men roped together? What is the difference between me and those who beat and shot the men roped together, begging for their lives? I am not sure I have an answer. Those alive at the end had their throats cut by Union men with a pocket knife, the blood washing the grass of the cemetery red. Those who witnessed the massacre dispersed and slowly went home. Those left alive did not speak of it again. At the Columbus Museum of Art, Paul Cadmus's painting hangs in silence through the morning and afternoon light. The pigment doesn't have a word to say. The dying men, like Christ, are pictured in almost coital release. But here, there is no rising. Those buried around me have been still for more than a century. Their desires and troubles fled. I wouldn't call it rest. All our stories are only repetitions, like light, coming and going. Each day indifferent, each day and a variation on the same. Never reaching what we call Chicago, not knowing what this really means. My last poem I'll read today is, I want to finish a line I did not begin. I want to finish a line I did not begin, to extend with my own hand what I did not first put down, to draw, to write, to speak the line, to enter into it, to become part of what I will never know the beginning of, or will know the end to. A simple thread of charcoal, of pencil, of ink, begun in possibility, in arabesque, a point put into movement. The March hare rolls away the stone of my shame. We are moving with its curves, delighted by its carelessness for what comes next. If every line isn't beautiful, then none are. Whatever the motion we begin, we are drawn away from our guilt, our guises, this line passing through our bodies surely as air into our lungs, and out again. It may not stay. So let me breathe what's to come with generosity. I will never be able to bend this line into a weapon, though I love power and security as much as you do. But this loop, this arc says only forward. It is not my line or not mine only. The blooms, white petals last only a while. Each petal sighing magnolia, magnolia, magnolia as it falls. The fleck of our ego no bigger than a grain of pollen. Let the honeybee attend to it. Do you see? Every time I attempt to close, there is a new gate we must pass through. In every story, there comes a point I can see no further. This line will never finish. Thank you.
This is one of my favorite ways to introduce Catherine Strange. In her Jack Straw project description, Catherine Strange wrote, quote, "When I was 22, I quit my dream job, threw out my antidepressants, got married, and followed my new husband to the UK in hopes of outrunning my mental illness. That was my introduction to Catherine Strange memoirs, and ever since then, I've been waiting for the rest of that story." That opening line to her description contained all the things I've come to expect with Catherine's writing. Great sense of timing, pacing, an instinct for surprise, and the type of humor I almost feel bad for laughing at. But we shouldn't feel bad, because that humor is Catherine's invitation to all of us. And it's an invitation from a writer who understands life can be absurd and traumatic simultaneously. Please welcome Catherine Strange.
Thank you so much for having me today. It's been wonderful to be part of this group. It's been such an honor, and I feel so, I just kind of have to pinch myself that I'm reading at the Central Branch. This is very exciting. Yeah, thanks for that introduction too, Michael. I have an excerpt from my memoir today. This is an excerpt from the 3rd chapter, which I'm calling A Bride. At my wedding reception, I seemed to wend back and forth between acting like a bride and being one. What did a bride think when she beheld the dozens of round tables laid with flowers and favors, silverware aligned by ruler? What did she feel when months of planning and arguments came to fruition on a single day, the happiest day, a day never to come again? In between the greetings and congratulations, I looked around the room and thought, who is this for? What kind of people could possibly need all this? It was wasteful and impractical, or it was beautiful, romantic, a fantasy I somehow now deserved. I wanted to judge the event, declare myself either stupid and selfish or given to pretending that I really was a pretty princess whose fairy tale had come to a happy end. Either way, I struggled not to hover above the event, watching myself. A traditional wedding is like a machine. I designed the day, but no longer had any control of it. I felt carried along by a conveyor belt of events and expectations, the stations of the bridal cross. It was time to cut the cake. Like every other detail of the day, dessert had been hammered out in tense trilateral negotiations. Mima, fresh off baking my cousin a wedding cake so crooked, it's a miracle its tiers stayed put long enough to be cut, had threatened to do the same for me. That just wouldn't do. Instead, my mother had surreptitiously nudged her out of the process, deploying Ryan and I to visit a Lower Queen Anne bakery, where a surly tattooed baker had placed cubes of cake before us and vowed he would never give in to the foul-tasting trend of fondant. Ryan, who had long ago simply decided to like all foods, was characteristically indecisive, but admitted a partiality to the lemon. I audibly gasped at the suggestion. Lemon was out of the question. Didn't I ever tell you the story of the lemon cake? By then, Ryan was familiar with my family's nightly rhythms of tripwire and lit fuse. He had witnessed firsthand my dad once screaming and flinging empty paint cans around the garage because I'd forgotten to bring my mother's painkillers to church. Clanging echoed across the driveway and into the house. Only in seeing Ryan's troubled expression could I grasp how not normal this reaction was. Conflict was the glue that held us together. Someone was always fighting, someone was always to blame. I had clung to my mother, which meant committing myself to seeing the world as she did, generally pinning the fault on my father. When I learned about divorce from an after-school special, I brought it to her as a potential remedy. If Dad were the source of all our problems, then let's get rid of him once and for all. She replied, "Oh, he's not getting out of this marriage alive." Sometimes I pushed back on her narrative of victimhood. If Dad was so awful, why had she married him in the first place? He wasn't always like this, she would begin. When they were dating, he'd been generous, bought her gifts and fine dinners. On other occasions, she'd tell the story of his proposal as if she were completely passive to the process. My father had proposed on a pier in Savannah after a scant 3 months of courtship. I was so shocked, I nearly dropped the ring right in the water. Nearly dropped it right in. She'd repeat, voice soggy with self-pity. Sometimes when she told the story, she skipped her response altogether, as if my father hadn't waited to hear it, instead dragging her by the wrist to his BMW as soon as she reflexively caught the ring. His shiny blue car cut through the twilight to the little house she shared with her parents, and then Papi and Mima were running out to greet the happy news. It was done, all without her ever uttering a word. Already, she had turned down the proposals of 7 suitors, and Papi had said something to the effect of, "If you don't marry that boy, I'm gonna have you locked up," while tapping at his temple. She, like me, was 22. All variations of this story ended with the tale of the wedding cake. If she bore any responsibility for the predicament we now found ourselves in, it was because she had chosen lemon flavor. It turned him sour, she would say. I would wait for further explanation, search her face for a glint of humor, but she always sat there, leaving me to wonder, did she really believe it? Even as a child, I knew it was absurd, but whether it was another in the tall tale tradition of her forebears or some desperate delusion, a part of her seemed to need this story. A slice of lemon cake had turned her man from light to darkness. I was hell-bent on avoiding her fate. Ryan's even-keeled demeanor was a direct rebuke to my father's temper. I inched our relationship forward, on guard for any sign of trickery. I reasoned, done everything I could to protect myself, and yet my fear persisted. Who was to say that as soon as the ink was dry on the marriage license, Ryan would not undergo some kind of monstrous souring? Just to be sure, at my wedding, we would serve only the sweetest of cakes. Thank you.
Now, rounding out the evening tonight is poet Ali Ong. Sometimes a poet will come along just when you need them. Ali Ong was one of those poets for me. In their application to Jack Straw, they describe their poems as an offering. And sometimes you don't realize how much an offering means, how hungry you've been, until you've been blessed with such a feast. There's an infectious warmth and joy in Ali's work, as well as in their person. A passionate understanding of the world around them, relationships that help keep us going. Their work is the best argument against cynicism. And even when the poems speak of exhaustion, of trauma, it offers so much of itself to the reader. We've been given so much nourishment that you both know you're going to make it no matter what. Please welcome Ali Ong.
Thank you, Michael, and everyone. It's pretty terrifying to have to follow all of my wonderful cohort mates, but I will do my best. Yeah, I'm gonna read a couple of poems from my Jackstraw project, which is a poetry collection that's maybe almost finished, but one of my teachers once told me that everything's a draft until you die. So that is the motto I'm bringing to my work. This first poem is called A Vegetarian Goes to H Mart. To finger the refrigerated meats. Something about forbidden fruit, how the flesh gives beneath my fingertips, makes me lick my lips with pleasure. My gorge rises as I imagine tearing into the muscle and sinew of raw pork belly, sucking the juice off the bone, bursting with carnality. I grit my teeth through the revulsion because one can never truly shed animal instinct. In the seafood aisle, my lungs fill with the stench of fish, a potpourri of fresh death. I don't turn away from the milky eyes and viscous tentacles of a neatly packaged octopus because my people aren't afraid to look death in the face. We eat our fish with the head still on and pick the bones out of our teeth at the dinner table. Some call it impolite, but I call it lack of pretense. 1,000 vacant eyes look back at me, open-mouthed, as if to say, someday you too will be gutted. Until then, I feast. This next poem is called Pap Smear. The receptionist hands me a survey. How many sexual partners have you had? Are they male or female? I lie like I always do. The magazine in the waiting room tells me that I can get a flat stomach from a diet of quinoa and asparagus. My stomach is not flat. It hangs over the front of my jeans like a coin purse bursting with organs. The doctor asks if I have a boyfriend, if he treats me nice, while she spreads my legs. One foot into the stirrup, then the other. You may experience some slight discomfort. A shock of cold metal disrupts my breath, curls my toes while the exam table paper crinkles beneath my bare flesh. I have opinions about the instrument of violence holding my body open, its history too brutal for metaphor, but I keep them to myself. The doctor makes me laugh while her hand is inside me, and it's just like love, except she is also scraping cells from my cervical canal. When she's done, she leaves the room while I redress under the guise of modesty, as though she was not just elbow deep in the warmest parts of me. I pray that my results will come back clear, that my cells will not be found wanting. I leave the office, microscopically smaller than I was before. This next poem is about my cat, and I learned recently that me, Emily, Jory, and Julie all have black cats. Maybe there's more of us, but this is for our black cats. It's Obad for my cat Gomez. Before the kettle steams and hisses on the stove top, before the demands of texts and emails light up my every screen, before the sunlight's warm, persistent breath streams through my window, the small, dark creature curled into a moon at my feet
yawns, and stretches his limbs out long and languid. He grazes his sandpaper tongue against my nose and ushers me into morning. My faithful penumbra, my alarm clock with no snooze button. I find proof that love exists in each soft black tuft of fur I pluck off my pillowcase. What sweeter way is there to start each day than with your insistent paws digging into the meat of my belly, urging me awake against my will? Little tornado hurtling through my apartment, my precious loaf of chaos. I would surrender my rest for the rest of my life, just to hear the low rumble of your contentment humming in my ear. This last poem started as a Pride Month poem, but Pride Month is year round when you're me. It's called Not Gay as in Happy, Queer as in Death to Cops and Politicians. May they live their every waking moment afraid of what the people will do to them. Not queer as in slapping a rainbow onto a Wells Fargo debit card. Gay as in let's hurl a Molotov cocktail through the window of the bank at nightfall and kiss while we watch the glass shatter like a supernova. Not gay as in pride flags, queer as in flagging, as in leather dykes and deviance, as in the way my fist fits perfectly inside my lover, the way their name in my notifications makes my clit quiver, the way their mouth makes me melt as sticky as ice cream during a heat wave. Queer like I'm so fruity, I may as well be a smoothie. I'm as flamboyant as a flamingo and as buoyant as a bumblebee blowing bubbles behind a bounce house. Gay like the ex-girlfriend of my ex-girlfriend is my ex-girlfriend, and we're all going dancing in matching leather pants. This Pride Month, I'm partnering with the freaks and the fairies to strike fear into the hearts of fascists. Let's untether our shame and toss it in the dumpster. Let's shout this prayer so loud our lungs collapse. Dear God, dear Bjork, dear everything, may the fruits inherit the earth. May the future we deserve spring into being with a swish of our limp wrists. Thank you.
You guys, what a delight. This has been such a wonderful afternoon. Thank you so much for being here. For folks that are here and want to check out the anthology, Levi has copies right there, and there are books by some of the readers that you heard today too, so check those out. And we would just love it if folks would take a minute to fill out their survey and drop that off as they're heading out. And if you're watching online, I just dropped the link in the chat and you can fill that out there. We're so grateful to everybody from Jack Straw for making today's program possible, to Michael and to Levi and all of the wonderful readers and writers. We're also grateful to the sponsors, the Seattle Public Library Foundation, the Gary and Connie Kunis Foundation, and the Seattle Times. And of course, thanks to everybody for joining us today. Thanks so much for being here. We'll see you next time.